When I showed up at the restaurant for my daughter's wedding, her groom rolled his eyes and grumbled, "Oh no, that old guy is here again." But then his father's eyes grew wide and he murmured, "Is that really him?" All the servers ducked into the shadows and the guests were shocked. They finally realized who I truly was, and that day turned into not only my daughter's wedding day, but the day justice triumphed. Before we go on, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment with what time it is in your location right now. Interesting little spot. A tad outdated though, right? Leland Harrington was standing at my entrance, eyeing the wooden floors and antique wallpaper with the look of someone inspecting a relic in a gallery. His pricey relaxed outfit, crisp chinos and a polo shirt that likely exceeded my monthly food expenses, seemed to broadcast his unease about being there. "We enjoy it here," I replied, mustering a grin as I moved back to allow him entry. Beatrice grew up in this home. My daughter emerged from the kitchen, glowing in her blue sundress, anxiously fiddling with her engagement ring. "Leland, you made it without issues?" She pecked his cheek, though I saw he hardly reciprocated. In the end, the GPS struggled with this area. He looked around once more, absorbing the family pictures along the corridor, the aged yet fine furnishings my late wife and I had gathered over the years. "Folks from your era typically don't get modern home styles." The remark landed like a smack, given with such offhand rudeness that I nearly overlooked its bite. Beatrice's cheeks turned rosy. "Dad's been in the kitchen all morning. Come on, let's have lunch." I'd devoted hours to making lamb chops with rosemary, baked veggies, and fresh rolls. The dining table shone with my finest china, fabric napkins arranged precisely. Leland sank into his seat as if granting us a privilege, promptly glancing at his phone. "So, Leland," I started dishing out the food. "Beatrice says you work in finance, investment advising, upscale portfolio handling." He sliced his lamb with exacting care, sampled a tiny piece, then placed his fork aside. "Intricate matters demand knowledge of market shifts that, frankly, most in your age group wouldn't comprehend." Beatrice interjected swiftly. "Dad's actually quite sharp with money. He's always offered me solid guidance on." "I'm certain he has." Leland's grin was narrow. "Different eras, different methods. No issue with sticking to basics." Basics, as though my lifetime's efforts were a kid's roadside stand. I observed him shifting food on his plate, nibbling minuscule portions like he feared poisoning. The guy my daughter adored couldn't even feign appreciation for the meal I'd invested my soul in. "This home has real charm," Beatrice commented, urgently attempting to guide the talk to calmer waters. "The authentic crown molding, the bay windows." Leland checked his watch. "It could benefit from modernization, though. These vintage spots, obsolete wiring. Likely asbestos in the structure. Once we're wed, we'll certainly opt for something more current. Sleek design, intelligent home tech. Once we're wed, not if. Once, as if my daughter's path was already set, her family home already dismissed." I topped off his water glass even though he hadn't requested it. "Have you both considered the wedding plans? Any thoughts on locations?" Beatrice's eyes sparkled. "Oh yes, we've been checking out the top spots in town," Leland cut in. "Funds aren't a concern naturally. We want a place that properly showcases our standing." "Our standing." I noted he used "our," but directed his gaze solely at me when saying it, as if claiming superiority over some perceived domain. The mist beyond my windows was growing denser. Standard late afternoon San Francisco climate. Indoors the atmosphere seemed to cool as well. I presented dessert, homemade apple pie, and saw Leland take a single courteous nibble before leaving it untouched. "Well," he remarked, eyeing his phone once more, "I guess we ought to cover the practical aspects, wedding arrangements, attendee lists, that kind of stuff." His manner implied we were organizing a corporate deal instead of honoring romance. I glanced at my daughter, still striving to maintain the dialogue, still working to smooth things over. Her joy outweighed my wounded ego, but a chill was forming in my core, a scheme starting to take shape. This fellow viewed us as hurdles to surmount, issues to resolve, obsolete elements to discard. He'd made that evident. What he didn't realize was that certain aged items possess keen blades when mishandled. The discussion was now turning to wedding sites, Beatrice referencing options she'd spotted online. "Ideal moment for my following step. I know a fantastic restaurant for nuptials," I mentioned, removing the final dinner dishes. "Affordable rates but top-notch quality. The chef there creates wonders with modest costs." Leland's fork clanged against his dessert dish. "We're not paupers." The event will be at my father's eatery, Harrington's Prime, the premier spot in the city. His tone had risen sharply. Beatrice almost knocked over her coffee. Leland, relax. Dad was merely offering assistance. Assistance? He rose so suddenly that his chair grated on the wood floor. Your father believes we require aid in locating an affordable site. Do you grasp what sort of affront that is? I maintained a steady tone, intrigued. I apologize. I wasn't aware your family operated in the restaurant field. Not merely any restaurant field. His posture swelled like a bird guarding its turf. Harrington's Prime. 5-star meals. We've entertained governors, tech leaders, global VIPs. The event sector contacts us for genuine opulence. That sounds remarkable, I responded, truly curious. Now, where exactly is it situated? Downtown business area, intersection of Montgomery and Bush. Arrogance shone in every syllable. My father constructed that dynasty from scratch. Began with one tiny bistro 3 decades back. Now we're the leading upscale dining hub in Northern California. Beatrice was exchanging cautionary glances between us. But I nudged onward softly. Your father must be a sharp entrepreneur. How many workers does such a venue need? 47 permanent staff. Head chef recruited from New York. Sommelier educated in France. Front staff fluent in several tongues. Each fact presented like a weapon. The kitchen setup alone exceeded what most earn in 5 years. And you're part of the daily management. I manage the commercial aspects, fiscal strategy, investment tactics, supplier deals. His prior disdain had shifted to boastful aggression. Someone must maintain the finances when overseeing a multi-million-dollar venture. Multi-million-dollar, 47 workers, central property. The figures were accumulating in my mind, forming an image I found quite compelling. That's intriguing, I commented. I bet the expenses are huge. Lease in that zone alone. Lease? Leland chuckled. But it had a sharpness. We possess the property. Purchased it fully in 2019. No loans from banks, no backers. Straight family funds. Straight family funds. I stored that nugget meticulously. Beatrice had fallen silent, observing this interaction with increasing discomfort. She could detect the subtleties, the manner 2 males assess one another, but she couldn't fathom what I was truly evaluating. Well, I stated at last, it appears Beatrice will enjoy a splendid event. I'm confident your father's eatery will deliver precisely the wedding she merits. Precisely. Leland adjusted his polo, content he'd asserted the correct order. The Harrington legacy carries weight in this town. Quality, heritage, superiority, elements that count. Elements that count, unlike affordable rates, evidently. Unlike this vintage residence where his prospective spouse matured content and cherished. I could tell he was finished with us, prepared to flee to his realm of elite lineage and modern aesthetics. The dinner was obviously concluded in his view, despite my handmade pie remaining largely uneaten on his plate. On the topic of the eatery, I remarked nonchalantly, "What sort of food does your father focus on?" "New American fused with French elements. Prefix options from $120 per head. Wine matches additional. We're reserved fully until December." He glanced at his watch more blatantly now. "In fact, I should likely depart shortly, early start tomorrow." The mist outdoors had deepened into authentic San Francisco dusk, and I could sense Leland was already halfway gone mentally. But he'd supplied me with precisely what I required. Arrogance-driven specifics on the family enterprise, exact site details, monetary boasting masked as chat, 47 workers relying on Harrington's Prime for their income, multi-million-dollar setup, choice property held outright, all quite notable and all quite exposed if issues arose. "Naturally," I replied. "Thanks immensely for visiting." "This has been enlightening. Well, I truly need to leave." Leland got up quickly, already grabbing his coat. The night mist had blanketed thickly beyond the panes, and he appeared keen to depart before it intensified. The farewell was clumsy, a quick handshake for me, a preoccupied peck on Beatrice's cheek. "I'll ring you tomorrow regarding the site specifics," he informed her, heading for the exit. "We must secure dates quickly." I observed from the veranda as he got into his black BMW. Of course it was a BMW, and drove off with excessive speed. The rear lights vanished into the haze in moments, leaving just the subtle odor of premium fumes. Beatrice remained next to me, her arms crossed against the cold. "I'm sorry about Leland," she murmured softly. "He's simply very guarding of the family enterprise. At times he becomes touchy when folks propose budget-friendly options," she cringed. "Dad, please. He didn't intend any harm. His father has labored so diligently to establish that restaurant. They're proud of their achievements. I get pride, I responded, leading her back indoors where comfort awaited. But pride and conceit aren't identical. We relaxed in the living area where the lamp glow was gentler, more lenient. Beatrice nestled into the sofa's edge, the identical place she'd occupied as a kid during our deep discussions. He made you feel insignificant, she admitted eventually. I noticed it. The way he spoke of the home of your ideas. Her tone was heavy with shame. I attempted to shift the talk, but he persisted. Beatrice. I positioned myself opposite her, bending ahead. I require you to handle something for me, and I need you not to inquire about it at this moment. Her brows rose. What sort of thing? Don't share details of my job. What I do professionally, where I operate, none of it. Just hold that info confidential for the time being. Dad, he already views you as some pensioner tinkering at home. Why should I just have faith in me here? Can you manage that? She examined my expression, hunting for hints I wasn't prepared to reveal. At last she agreed. Sure, but you're acting secretive and I dislike secrets. Occasionally, secrets exist for valid causes. A vehicle door banged outdoors. Leland's BMW coming back. Beatrice leaped to peer through the window. He's returned. Likely left something behind. But rather than approaching the entrance, I heard the motor roar once more. Amid the mist, I glimpsed Beatrice dashing to the road, her blue dress vivid against the dim twilight. She'd forgotten her coat indoors. I observed from the pane as she entered the passenger side. Short exchange, movements I couldn't interpret. Then they departed again, this time permanently. The residence seemed altered without them. Bigger, quieter, yet somehow more intentional. I washed the meal dishes systematically, pondering Harrington's prime intersection of Montgomery and Bush. 47 workers, multi-million-dollar venture, family possession. Leland Harrington believed he understood precisely what type of person I was. Some basic pensioner who didn't comprehend contemporary commerce, who resided in a dated home and offered innocent ideas about affordable eatery costs, a man whose daughter had elevated beyond her humble roots to snag a trophy. He had no clue that certain aged items are more perilous than they seem. I wiped the final dish and proceeded upstairs to my workspace. Time to conduct some investigation on the Harrington family enterprise. Purely from interest, naturally. Just to gain a deeper grasp of the domain my prospective son-in-law was so boastful about. My machine buzzed awake in the dimness, the display's light bouncing off the pane where mist clung to the glass like inquisitive digits. My workspace resembled a haven following the afternoon's act. 2 screens flickered on as I eased into the familiar leather seat that had seen innumerable midnight study marathons. Outdoors, the mist was condensing into nightfall, but indoors, the bright illumination made everything crisp. I entered Harrington's prime San Francisco into the query field and observed the outcomes load. Their site came up initially, shiny images of flawlessly arranged meals, sophisticated dining area photos, endorsements lauding outstanding dishes and flawless attention, the sort of promotional sheen that demands substantial investment. Address verified, 847 Montgomery Street, corner of Bush Central Business Zone, precisely as Leland had bragged. Operating times Tuesday to Saturday 5:30 to 10:30 p.m., shut Sundays and Mondays. Prix-fix selections beginning at $120 per individual, just as he'd mentioned. But sites deceive. Critiques reveal alternate tales. I navigated to Yelp, Google feedback, open table scores. The trend surfaced rapidly, too swiftly for ease. Varied opinions tilting strongly unfavorable in the last half year. Grievances regarding sluggish attention, inflated subpar cuisine, personnel who behaved as if granting favors to patrons, waited 45 minutes for starters, one fresh critique stated. Steak arrived overdone and chilly. When I pointed it out, the server sighed and claimed the kitchen was swamped. Never returning. Another, lovely venue. Awful performance. Our waiter vanished for 20-minute intervals. Dishes were tepid upon eventual delivery. For these costs utterly intolerable, I pulled out a yellow legal pad, old habits from decades of taking notes, and started writing. Service complaints consistent across multiple reviews. Food quality declining over past year. Staff attitude universally described as condescending or indifferent. Maybe these were just competitors writing fake reviews. Maybe disgruntled customers with unrealistic expectations. But the patterns were too specific, too detailed. Real customers mentioned specific dishes, specific servers, specific dates. This wasn't a coordinated attack. This was a business in decline. My pen tapped against the desk as I read deeper. Health Department inspection reports from the city website. 2 violations in the past 8 months. Improper food storage temperatures. Inadequate hand-washing stations. Minor infractions, but telling ones. Good restaurants don't accumulate violations. Leland had painted a picture of culinary excellence. 5-star dining. Governors and tech executives choosing Harrington's Prime for important occasions. But the evidence suggested something different entirely. A restaurant trading on past reputation while current operations crumbled. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't just about my daughter's wedding venue anymore. This was about her future with a man whose family business might be built on quicksand. The clock on my computer read 5:30 p.m. Dinner time for most people, but Harrington's Prime didn't open until Tuesday. I had 2 days to decide whether to investigate further or trust that the negative reviews were outliers, that Leland's confidence was justified. 2 days to choose between protective father and interfering old man. I closed the laptop with a soft click, but the restaurant's address was already memorized. 847 Montgomery Street, Tuesday through Saturday. Maybe it was time to see for myself whether the Harrington empire was as solid as Leland claimed. Monday dragged past like a guilty conscience. I'd spent the weekend replaying Saturday's lunch, analyzing every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture. By Monday evening, curiosity had hardened into determination. The downtown fog hung thick as I walked the 3 blocks from the Montgomery Street BART station to 847 Montgomery. Harrington's Prime occupied the ground floor of a renovated 19th century building, its facade promising old-world elegance, brass fixtures, etched glass windows, burgundy awning with gold lettering. First impressions mattered in the restaurant business, and theirs made the right statement. A hostess in black dress and forced smile greeted me. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation? I was hoping you might have something available just for one." Her eyes swept over my casual blazer and khakis. Acceptable, but not impressive. "We're quite busy tonight, but I think we can accommodate you." The tone suggested she was doing me a favor. "Right this way, please." She led me to Asmal table near the kitchen doors, the kind of spot reserved for walk-ins and customers the staff considered unimportant. Fine by me. Better view of operations from here anyway. The dining room tried hard to evoke sophistication. Dark wood paneling, crisp white tablecloths, subdued lighting from crystal fixtures. But my trained eye caught the details others missed. Water spots on the glasses, slight tears in the upholstery, carpet worn thin in the height traffic areas, the kind of accumulated wear that suggested deferred maintenance. Corners cut where customers wouldn't immediately notice. A waiter approached, menu in hand, young man, probably college-aged, with the particular brand of arrogance that comes from working somewhere that considers itself exclusive. "Can I start you with something to drink?" he asked, though his attention was already drifting to more promising tables. "Just water for now. I'd like a few minutes with the menu." He nodded and disappeared without enthusiasm. I studied the offerings. New American cuisine with French influences exactly as Leland had described. Felt mignon for $58. Lobster risotto for 42. Duck comfort for 39. Premium prices for what better be premium execution around me. The restaurant hummed with the kind of forced energy that comes from staff trying too hard. Servers moved with studied efficiency, but I noticed the timing was off. Tables receiving appetizers while others still waited for drink orders. Entras arriving before appetizers were cleared. Basic service rhythm completely disrupted. The couple at the table next to mine was discussing their delayed meal in increasingly frustrated whispers. "Minutes for bread service," the woman muttered. "At these prices, this is ridiculous." When my waiter returned, I was ready. "I'll have the filet mignon, medium rare, with the potato gratin." "Of course," he said. But there was something in his tone, a barely concealed smirk, as if my order amused him somehow. "That'll be right out." Right out turned into 45 minutes. I watched other tables receive their food while mine remained conspicuously empty. When the plate finally arrived, the steak was overcooked and lukewarm. The potato gratin congealed into an unappetizing mass. "How is everything?" the waiter asked peremptorily, already moving away before I could answer. "Actually," I called him back, "this steak is well done, not medium rare." He glanced at the plate with theatrical concern. "Oh well, the kitchen's really backed up right now. I could ask them to fix it, but it'll probably be another 30 minutes. Another 30 minutes at a restaurant that charged premium prices and claimed exceptional service. I thought about the health department violations, the negative reviews, the declining standards hidden behind marketing polish. That's fine, I said. I'll eat it as is. The relief on his face was almost comical. Clearly, most customers who complained were made to wait long enough that they gave up. Efficient way to avoid kitchen costs while maintaining the illusion of fine dining. I ate slowly, observing everything. Staff huddled in corners, complaining about customers and management. Kitchen sounds of dropped pans and raised voices. The unmistakable atmosphere of a workplace where standards had slipped, and no one particularly cared about fixing them. By the time I signaled for the check, I had everything I needed to know about Harrington's Prime. This wasn't a five-star establishment hosting governors and tech executives. This was a failing restaurant coasting on reputation while delivering substandard service to customers, who were either too polite or too intimidated to complain effectively. My daughter wanted to hold her wedding reception here. The thought made my stomach clench tighter than the overcooked steak. The check sat on my table like an accusation. $87 for a mediocre meal and indifferent service. I was reaching for my wallet when I heard a door slam somewhere behind me, followed by sharp footsteps on hardwood. What is he doing here? The voice carried across the dining room with unmistakable authority and anger. I turned to see Leland emerging from what appeared to be a back office. His face flushed red ashy spotted me at my corner table. Other diners began to notice the commotion, conversations dropping to whispers. He strode across the restaurant like a man approaching battle, weaving between tables with barely controlled fury. The staff I'd been watching all evening suddenly found urgent tasks that required their immediate attention, heads down, avoiding eye contact with their boss. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, arriving at my table with enough force to make the water glasses tremble. "Did you come to spy on my restaurant?" I set down my napkin carefully, maintaining the same calm I'd practiced through decades of difficult situations. "I just wanted to have dinner, Leland. Your restaurant has quite a reputation." "That's complete nonsense." His voice rose another octave, drawing stares from every occupied table. "You're here to cause trouble, to undermine our business somehow." The accusation was so paranoid, so detached from reality that I almost laughed. "Leland, I ordered a meal and ate it. There's nothing sinister about get out." The words came like a slap. "Get out of here immediately." The dining room had gone completely silent now. Servers stood frozen with plates in their hands, watching their boss have a public meltdown. The hostess looked mortified. The couple next to me was openly staring, probably wondering if they should call for help. "Leland," I said quietly, "you're making a scene." "Perhaps we should." I said, "Get out." He was practically shouting now, face purple with rage. "You have no business being here. This is harassment." Harassment for eating dinner at a public restaurant. I wondered what his father would think of this performance, what the other customers were thinking as they watched the supposed financial director of Harrington's Prime lose control completely. I stood slowly pulling cash from my wallet and placing it on the table. Exact amount plus tip. Despite the terrible service, professional habits die hard, and I wasn't about to give him ammunition by skipping out on the bill. "I'll leave," I said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Thank you for the educational evening." The walk to the door felt endless. Every eye in the restaurant followed my progress, some sympathetic, others simply curious about the drama unfolding. Behind me, I could hear Leland still ranting to no one in particular about spies and harassment, and respect for family businesses. The cool evening air hit my face like salvation. I walked slowly down Montgomery Street, processing what had just happened. Leland's paranoid overreaction, his complete loss of professional composure, the way his own staff had cowered rather than support him, all of it painted a picture I was beginning to understand. This wasn't just a restaurant with service problems. This was a business being run by someone fundamentally unstable, someone who saw enemies in paying customers and threats in reasonable questions. And my daughter wanted to build her life with this man. The fog swirled around the street lamps as I headed toward the BART station, but my mind was crystal clear. I'd come here looking for information about a wedding venue. Instead, I discovered something much more troubling, a future son-in-law whose judgment and temperament were far worse than I'd imagined. The fog swirled thick around the Montgomery Street lamps as I walked away from Harrington's Prime, my footsteps echoing off wet pavement. Other pedestrians hurried past with heads down, everyone eager to escape the damp chill settling over downtown San Francisco. Behind me, I could still see the restaurant's warm glow, Could imagine the whispered conversations about the man who'd been publicly ejected for the crime of eating dinner. Professional humiliation wasn't new to me, but this felt different, personal, raw, in a way that caught me off guard. I turned onto Bush Street, letting muscle memory guide me toward the Powell Street BART station. My route took me past 3 other restaurants: a cozy Italian place with checkered tablecloths, a trendy gastropub with craft beer signs, a hole-in-the-wall Chinese joint that had probably been serving the same family recipes for decades. Each one buzzed with satisfied customers, efficient service, the kind of atmosphere that made people want to return. Everything Harrington's Prime pretended to be but wasn't. The walk helped clear my head, the rhythm of footsteps replacing the chaos of Leland's shouting. By the time I reached Market Street, shock was giving way to analysis. What I'd witnessed tonight wasn't just poor service or one bad evening. This was systematic failure, understaffed kitchen, undertrained servers, management that responded to problems with aggression instead of solutions. If he treats his future father-in-law this way, what will happen to Beatrice after the wedding? The question followed me down into the BART station, through the turnstiles onto the train that would carry me back toward home. I'd seen this pattern before in my professional life. Businesses that looked successful from the outside while rotting from within. Pride masking incompetence, arrogance hiding desperation. Leland's explosion tonight hadn't been about protecting his restaurant's reputation. It had been about protecting lies. The train swayed gently as we crossed under the bay, and I found myself thinking about my late wife. Sarah would have had strong opinions about tonight's events. She'd always been better at reading people than I was, quicker to spot the warning signs that someone wasn't what they seemed. Trust your instincts, she used to say. Your brain knows things your heart doesn't want to accept. My instincts were screaming now. Leland Harrington wasn't just rude or entitled. He was dangerous, not in a physical sense necessarily, but in the way that weak men with power often become dangerous through manipulation, through control, through the gradual erosion of everyone around them. And Beatrice was planning to marry him in 6 weeks. The train pulled into my station and I climbed the stairs back to street level. The fog was thicker here in the residential neighborhoods, muffling sound and turning streetlights into soft halos. I walked the familiar blocks toward home, past houses where families were settling in for the evening, past lives that seemed simpler and safer than the one my daughter was choosing. By the time I reached my front door, my professional mind was fully engaged. I had information now, concrete evidence of poor business practices, unstable management, and a man whose public behavior suggested serious character flaws. The question was what to do with that information. Inside, the house felt too quiet, too empty. I hung my coat in the hallway closet and was reaching for the light switch when my phone started ringing. How could you do that, Dad? Leland told me everything. Beatrice's voice hit like a physical blow, pure fury crackling through the phone line. No greeting, no gentle questioning, just immediate attack from someone who'd already made up her mind about guilt and innocence. Beatrice, it's not what you think. He said you came to the restaurant and caused a scene, that you embarrassed him in front of his customers and staff. Her voice broke slightly, pain mixing with anger. How could you humiliate him like that? I sank into the living room chair, still holding my coat. I went there for dinner. That's all I wanted to see. You went there to spy on him, to find fault with his family's business. Each accusation landed with increasing intensity. He trusted you enough to tell you about the restaurant and you used that against him. The manipulation was breathtaking in its completeness. Leland had gotten to her first, shaped the narrative, cast himself as victim before I'd even walked through my front door. My calm, rational daughter, the woman who usually thought through problems carefully, had been transformed into an emotional weapon aimed at her own father. Beatrice, please listen to me. I simply ordered a meal. Stop lying. The words came out as a sob. Leland said you harassed the staff, complained about everything, tried to make trouble for his father's business, and when he politely asked you to leave, you made a scene. Politely asked. The phrase was so far from reality, it was almost funny, except nothing about this conversation was funny. That's not what happened, I said, keeping my voice level despite the growing knot in my stomach. I was a paying customer. I ordered dinner, a tete, and was preparing to leave when he spotted me. He became aggressive. He was protecting his family's reputation from someone who came there with malicious intent. Malicious intent. She was using his exact words now, pairing his version of events with complete conviction. The speed of her transformation was stunning. This was the same daughter who'd apologized for his behavior just days ago, who'd promised to keep my profession secret, who'd seemed uncomfortable with his arrogance. "Sweetheart, I understand you want to defend him, but don't call me sweetheart." The fury in her voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard from her. "You've shown your true feelings about Leland. You don't want me to be happy. You can't stand that I found someone successful and accomplished. That's not true. I want nothing more than your happiness. Then why did you go to his restaurant to cause trouble? Why couldn't you just stay out of our lives?" "Stay out of our lives." The phrase cut deeper than the accusations. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd raised alone after her mother died, the woman I'd supported through college and career struggles and relationship heartbreaks. And now she was telling me to stay out of her life because a man she'd known for 8 months had convinced her I was the enemy. "Beatrice." I tried one more time. "Please just consider that there might be another side to this story." "That may be. There is no other side." Her voice was final, absolute. "I believe the man I'm going to marry. I believe someone who loves me. And if you can't respect that, if you can't respect him, then maybe you shouldn't be part of our wedding." The threat hung in the air like smoke. I sat in my dark living room, still wearing my coat, listening to my daughter's harsh breathing through the phone. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like curious ghosts. "I see," I said quietly. "To you? Do you really? Because I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with your suspicions and your interference. Leland was right. Some people just can't be happy for others' success." The line went dead. I sat holding the phone long after the dial tone faded, staring at the device as if it might ring again with an apology, an explanation, anything that would restore the daughter I thought I knew. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sounds of the city settling it into night. Leland hadn't just ejected me from his restaurant. He'd ejected me from my daughter's life. The weeks that followed moved like a slow-motion disaster. I called Beatrix's number 17 times over the next month. Each attempt met with voicemail. Each message left increasingly desperate. My texts showed as delivered but never read. Electronic messages disappearing into the void of her anger. "Beatrice, please call me back. We need to talk about what really happened. Sweetheart, I'm worried about you. This silence isn't like you. I love you. Nothing else matters." But silence was exactly like her when she'd made up her mind. Even as a child, Beatrice could shut out the world when she felt betrayed. The trait that had protected her from playground bullies was now protecting her from her own father. My house felt hollow without her weekly visits, without the sound of her laughter echoing from the kitchen where she'd helped me cook Sunday dinners. I found myself setting 2 places at the table from habit, then staring at the empty chair where she used to sit and complain about work. Ask for advice about men who weren't worth her time. Plan the future that had seemed so bright just weeks ago. The future that now included Leland Harrington as a permanent fixture. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, accepting assignments I'd normally delegate, anything to avoid coming home to the silence. My colleagues noticed the change but attributed it to normal stress. None of them knew about the daughter who no longer answered my calls or the future son-in-law who'd successfully poisoned the most important relationship in my life. Weeks into the silence, I almost drove to her apartment, sat in my car outside her building for 20 minutes, watching her windows for signs of life. But what would I say? How do you convince someone they've been manipulated when the manipulator has made you the villain of their story? I drove home without knocking on her door. May arrived with typical San Francisco unpredictability, sunny mornings giving way to foggy afternoons, the city unable to decide what season it wanted to embrace. I was sorting through mail on a Tuesday evening when I saw the envelope. Thick cream paper, elegant calligraphy, the kind of formal invitation that announces important occasions. Mr. Delbert Myers was cordially invited to the wedding of Miss Beatrix Catherine Myers and Mr. Leland James Harrington. Saturday, May 17, 2025. Reception to follow at Harrington's Prime tomorrow. I stared at the invitation, turning it over in my hands like it might contain hidden messages. After weeks of silence, she'd still invited me, either from obligation or hope, or because Leland had insisted show her father exactly how little his opinions mattered, by making him watch her marry the man he'd tried to warn her against. The reception would be at Harrington's Prime. Of course it would. The same restaurant where I'd been publicly humiliated, where Leland had revealed his true nature to a room full of witnesses. They wanted me to watch my daughter celebrate her future in the exact location where her fiancé had shown me who he really was. I set the invitation on my kitchen table and stared at it while I made coffee. 24 hours to decide whether to attend the wedding of someone who no longer spoke to me. To watch her bind her life to a man I knew would make her miserable. 24 hours to figure out how to save my daughter from the biggest mistake of her life. The coffee grew cold as I sat there planning. My professional mind was engaged now, calculating risks and opportunities, considering all the ways this could go wrong. But beneath the strategic thinking was something simpler and more powerful. A father's love that refused to give up even when giving up seemed like the only rational choice. Tomorrow, Beatrice would marry Leland Harrington. Tomorrow I would be there to watch it happen. Saturday morning arrived gray and cool. Typical San Francisco weather that couldn't decide between seasons. I woke before dawn with the wedding invitation still visible on my nightstand, cream paper catching the early light like an accusation. Today would change everything one way or another. The shower water ran hotter than usual, steam fogging the bathroom mirror as I let the heat work tension from my shoulders. Methodical preparation had always calmed my nerves before difficult assignments, and this morning would be no different. Shave with the grain, then against. Check for missed spots, hair combed precisely. Not a strand out of place. In my walk-in closet, I surveyed the formal options with the same attention I'd once given to restaurant reviews. Navy suit, charcoal gray, classic black. Each sent a different message. Today called for authority wrapped in respectability. The charcoal wool with subtle pinstripes tailored perfectly. To project competence without ostentation. The tie selection took longer. Burgundy silk, conservative but rich. Sterling silver cufflinks my late wife had given me for our 20th anniversary. Italian leather shoes polished to mirror brightness. Every detail mattered when establishing credibility with people who judge appearances first. Standing before the full-length mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back. Months of takeout meals and sleepless nights had sharpened my features, added gravity to expressions that used to be softer. Professional armor, complete and impenetrable. The wedding gift sat wrapped on my dresser, a crystal vase from Tiffany, elegant and appropriate. Nothing that would reveal my true profession or financial capabilities. Just a thoughtful father's present for his daughter's new life. The card inside contained 3 words. Love you always. I checked my watch. 8:30 a.m. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. reception immediately following. Enough time to drive downtown, find parking, and position myself strategically before the crucial moment arrived. Keys, wallet, invitation tucked into my breast pocket. One final glance around the house that had felt so empty for the past month, knowing that when I returned tonight, everything would be different. Either I'd have my daughter back or I'd have lost her forever. But Leland Harrington would finally understand exactly who he'd been dealing with. The front door closed behind me with decisive finality. Time to remind certain people that respect isn't negotiable and that some old men bite harder than others expect. Harrington's prime had been transformed into something approaching actual elegance. White silk draping softened the worn edges I'd noticed during my previous visit, while strategic lighting created warm pools that disguised water stains and carpet wear. Wedding magic hiding reality beneath beautiful surfaces. How perfectly appropriate. I entered during the cocktail hour, scanning the room for familiar faces. Guests mingled in small clusters, champagne glasses catching light from the crystal fixtures. The staff moved with unusual precision, clearly under strict orders to perform flawlessly for this special occasion. Dad. Beatrix's voice cut through the reception chatter like salvation. She appeared at my side in her wedding gown, ivory silk with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. Beautiful beyond description, radiant with happiness that made my chest tighten with protective love. I'm so glad you came, she whispered, embracing me tightly. I was shopping, after everything that happened. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, I replied, meaning every word. You look absolutely stunning. Relief flooded her features. I've missed you so much. This whole month felt wrong without you here. Around us, I noticed several restaurant employees stealing glances in our direction. Word was spreading quickly through the staff. Theman from that night was back, the one who'd caused such a scene with the boss. Nervous energy rippled through their ranks like stones dropped in still water. Across the room near the bar where wedding toast would soon be offered, I spotted Leland deep in conversation with an older man who had to be his father. Wayne Harrington possessed the same arrogant bearing as his son, but tempered with the weariness that comes from actually running a business. They were discussing something intently. occasionally gesturing toward different areas of the restaurant. "Oh no, that old man showed up again." Leland's voice carried further than he'd intended, reaching several nearby guests who turned with curious expressions. His father followed his gaze, landing directly on me with sharp calculation. "Is that really him?" Wayne's response held notes I couldn't immediately interpret. Recognition, perhaps, or concern that went deeper than simple wedding guest management. The conversation between father and son continued in lowered tones, but their body language spoke volumes. Wayne's questions, Leland's defensive responses, the way both men kept glancing in my direction with growing unease. Whatever reputation preceded me, it was significant enough to cause genuine worry. I stayed close to Beatrice, playing the devoted father role, while observing everything with professional detachment. Staff members whispered among themselves, some pointing discreetly in my direction. Guests began to notice the undercurrent of tension, conversations growing quieter as people sensed drama brewing beneath the wedding's polished surface. Wayne Harrington straightened his tie and began walking purposefully in our direction, his expression carefully neutral, but eyes sharp with assessment. The moment I'd been waiting for was finally approaching. Behind him, Leland watched with visible anxiety, clearly dreading whatever conversation was about to unfold. "Time for introductions. Good afternoon." Wayne Harrington extended his hand with practiced hospitality, but it caught the careful way he studied my face. "I'm Wayne Harrington, father of the groom and owner of this establishment. I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "Delbert Myers," I replied, accepting his handshake with firm confidence. "Father of the bride." "Ah, yes, of course. How do you find my restaurant? I do hope everything meets your expectations." The question hung in the air between us, loaded with more weight than simple politeness. Around us, nearby guests had begun to listen, sensing significance in this seemingly casual exchange. "Don't worry," I said with careful precision, my voice carrying just far enough to reach interested ears. "Today I'm just a guest, not a restaurant critic." The effect was immediate and electric. Wayne's handshake faltered, his eyes widening with sudden recognition. Several guests who'd been half listening snapped to attention, the words "restaurant critic" rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Staff members froze mid-service, understanding immediately that their previous treatment of this man had been catastrophically inappropriate. Wayne began, then stopped himself, diplomatic training wearing with obvious dismay. "Delbert Myers, San Francisco Chronicle," I confirmed calmly. "Though, as I said, today I'm simply here to celebrate my daughter's wedding." Beatrix stared at me with shock and dawning understanding. "Dad, you're a restaurant critic. That's your job." Before I could answer, Leland appeared at my elbow, his face pale and desperate. The arrogant man who'd publicly humiliated me 6 weeks ago had been replaced by someone who understood exactly how much trouble he was in. "Please," he said quietly, his voice thick with barely controlled panic. "Please forgive me. I had no idea who you were. I never would have the way I treated you." "I see." I studied his face with the same clinical attention I'd once reserved for overcooked steaks and pretentious wine lists. "Forgiveness takes time, Leland, especially since, because of your behavior, my daughter didn't speak to me for a month." The wedding reception continued around us, but our small circle had become the center of attention. Wayne worked frantically to manage the situation with diplomatic smiles and quiet damage control, while staff members exchanged horrified glances about their previous service. Leland's hand shook slightly as he reached for his champagne glass. "Whatever I can do to make this right, and anything at all." "What you can do," I said with measured calm, "is treat people with respect in the future, regardless of who they are or what you think they can do for you." Beatrix slipped her arm through mine, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. "This is why you asked me not to tell him about your work. Sometimes it's useful to see how people behave when they think no one important is watching," I replied, watching Leland's face cycle through shame, fear, and desperate calculation. The man who'd called me an interfering old fool, who'd had me thrown out of his restaurant like a common troublemaker, now stood before me, seeking forgiveness he hadn't earned. Justice served not through revenge, but through the simple revelation of truth. Wayne cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should discuss how to move forward from here." I looked at my daughter, radiant in her wedding gown, but finally seeing her fiancé clearly for the first time. The choice of what happened next would be hers to make, but at least now she'd make it with all the information she needed. If you like this story, please like this video, Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.